Everywhere you look in this country, people are debating gun control. Will it stop violent crimes like the one we saw in Newtown? Does it go against the Second Amendment? Just how far should it go? My guest tonight is attempting to break through this stalemate by proposing a law that would not limit gun ownership. Instead, it would require our state's gun owners to buy insurance on their firearms. Beyond that, it would allow insurance companies to offer higher rates to those who own assault weapons and lower rates to those who store their guns safely. Representative David Linsky, thank you for joining me again.
It's a pleasure to be here.
And first off, could you go a little bit more in-depth into the legislation you're proposing in the
Sure.
State House?
You're talking about a bill that would require liability insurance for gun owners. The intent of this is to make guns safer. We recognize that people are going to own guns. It's part of a comprehensive strategy to make gun ownership safer. And the insurance industry has been able to make driving a car safer. And this is a similar attempt.
Now, you said in the New York Times that insurance companies can help prevent a number of gun tragedies each year. How do you think this will help prevent those tragedies, specifically?
Well, there are 32,000 gun deaths a year. Over half of them are accidental shootings and suicides. This part of the bill, and it's part of a comprehensive bill, is to get at those accidental shootings and suicides. We're trying to have a situation where if you're going to have a gun in your house, we want to encourage responsible behavior. For example, keeping it locked up in a safe, keeping the access away from people who shouldn't have the access to guns, or taking advanced safety courses. So we're trying to make life safer for the people who do have guns.
And you said this was part of a more comprehensive bill. Could you explain just a little bit about what else is in this larger bill?
Sure. We look at everything related to guns, whether it's the licensing aspects, storage aspects, enhanced penalties for using a gun in a crime, whether or not people who have certain mental health issues should have access to guns. One thing I've learned, and I've studied gun control for 30 years, is that there is not one single solution towards reducing gun violence, but there are a lot of individual small steps that we can take that each one will help reduce it a little bit, and then when you add it up all together, we can make a real dent in those 32,000 gun deaths a year.
And how important is this legislation to you? You said you've been studying it for 30 years. Where does this hit home for you?
Oh, well, I was a prosecutor in Middlesex County for 14 years, and I had the experience of trying and investigating about 25 different murder cases. In addition to that, I was required to go to many crime scenes where people had been shot, and it could be an intentional shooting, it could be a suicide, it could be an accidental shooting, and let me tell you, that type of situation can just rip through a family and destroy a lot of different lives. So this is very, very important to me.
And what else, you've mentioned a lot, what else do you think needs to be done to curb gun violence on the national level?
Well, on a national level, there are some very easy things that we need to do. Clearly, we need to do universal background checks. Right now in this country, 40% of the sales of guns take place in either at gun shows or in private sellers. And they don't have to do any type of background check whatsoever when they sell a gun. It could be anybody off the street. That's just wrong, because clearly the law states now that if you're a felon or if you've been convicted of certain types of misdemeanors, or if you've ever been confined to a mental institution, you don't have a right to own a firearm. But if you don't do a background check, and that's 40% of the sales, then we're missing out on people, and people who are prohibited by law are buying guns.
And do you think Congress should reenact the assault weapons ban?
Absolutely. Look, will the assault weapons ban, reduce all killings? Absolutely not. Assault weapons are only used in 2 or 3% of murders out there, but that's 2 or 3%, and that's a lot of lives when you add it up on 32,000 a year. And quite frankly, assault weapons are civilian versions of military weapons. They are not used for hunting. They're not effectively used in self-defense. Quite frankly, there is no reason why people in this country need assault weapons.
So how do you go about this legislation and these processes without encroaching on the Second Amendment rights?
Second Amendment is not an absolute. Even Justice Scalia, the most conservative of the justices on the U.S. Supreme Court, has said that there can be reasonable restrictions. For example, people aren't allowed to have machine guns without a specialized permit. They're not allowed to have bazookas or hand grenades. Same thing can go for assault weapons. It's a reasonable restriction. Look, I don't want to inhibit anybody's right to go hunting or to do certain types of target shooting, but you have to draw the line, and we're losing way too many people every single day.
Now let's move away from this topic and more onto the Congress. The Senate special election to replace John Kerry's Senate seat now that he's the Secretary of State. The two Democrats in the race from your party are Representative Ed Markey and Representative Stephen Lynch. A lot of people in the Democratic community said that it was a bad idea for Representative Lynch to enter the race and take votes away from Markey. Do you feel the same way?
Well, look, I'm supporting Ed Markey. I think that he's a great congressman, and I think he'll make a great United States Senator. Congressman Lynch is a good congressman. He has a right to run. There'll be a vigorously contested Democratic primary, and in the long run, it'll help whoever the Democratic candidate is against the Republican, and I'm convinced that we can hold this seat.
How do you think that the comments Representative Markey made recently comparing the Citizens United decision to the Dred Scott v. Sandford decision, which, for those of you who don't know, was the decision that basically extended slavery, how do you think that will affect his campaign, especially where the African-American community is involved?
Yeah, I think that when you really look at what Congressman Markey said, he certainly wasn't comparing slavery to campaign finance. That's not what it was. All he was saying was that the Dred Scott decision needed to be reversed. He said the same thing about Citizens United. It's a non-issue.
That's very interesting. And the last time you were on this program, you said, and I'm quoting here, if Ed decided to retire, I'd certainly take a look at that. Now, if Representative Markey wins John Kerry's Senate seat, would you run for a seat in the House of Representatives?
It doesn't look that way now. I'm not going to foreclose the door, but it's interesting. There's always been two seats that I've been interested in running for. One was Ed Markey's congressional seat, and the other was the Middlesex County District Attorney's office, where I spent 14 years. They're both going to be open at the same time because Jerry Leone announced he's not running for re-election. I'm taking a hard look at both of them, but if I were a betting man today, you may see me running for district attorney next year.
And what do you think are some of the things you try and do at the district attorney level to help curb gun violence and other things in our county?
Look, we have a great tradition of district attorneys in Middlesex County, from John Droney to Scott Hushbarger to Tom Riley to Martha Coakley to Jerry Leone, and I'd hope to follow in that tradition. Very simply, you want to run the best professional law office in the state. And I was proud to be part of that office for 14 years, and if I'm so fortunate as to be the district attorney, I'd want to continue in that tradition.
And I wish you the best of luck, Representative David Linsky.
Thank you, Evan. It's always a pleasure.
And we'll be right back with more Wicked Teen from YBA. I'm Evan Berkowitz, YBA News, Waltham.